9th December 1946, a pivotal day in the history of modern India. यह एक ऐसा ऐतिहासिक दिन था जब संपूर्ण देश से संविधान सभा के प्रतिनिधि एकजुट होकर पहली बार देश की प्रारूप रेखा, देश का आईन, देश का संविधान, हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन रचने जा रहे थे. In this discussion of Gyan Darshan today, we will be talking about this very journey of making of the Indian Constitution. In today's session, we have with us Professor D. Ananda from Faculty of Political Science, School of Social Sciences, and myself is Anjali, a research scholar in the same discipline. The theme of today's discussion is Social, Economic and Philosophical Foundations of the Indian Constitution, या हमारे संविधान निर्माण की सामाजिक, आर्थिक और दार्शनिक परिप्रेक्ष्य क्या रहा, उस पर हम आज चर्चा करेंगे. So, ये कोर्स particularly bachelor's और master's in political science scholars के लिए designed है. And as we begin, at the very onset, I would like to discuss with you, sir, that what was the historical context, what was the churning in the nation in which the Indian constitution making started to happen?
To understand this context, actually, we have to understand the national movement and the context of the national movement at that time, actually. Actually, when we look at the constitution making, the Constituent Assembly met in a very in a historical juncture, at the same time very problematic, at the same time a kind of a crucial time of the nation, actually. So in that circumstances, they started actually looking at the things, especially a constitution is a politico-legal document according to which the country will be functioning. So they wanted to decide what kind of constitution is required for the future of this India, what is the best suited kind of available alternatives are there. They were doing a lot of research at that time. So in this historical conditions, actually, in 1947, we have got the freedom, especially the political power has been transferred from the Britishers to Indian rulers. From 1946 onwards, we have started actually making the Constitution, actually. The writing of the Constitution, the Constituent Assembly first actually met in 1946 itself, actually. So at that time, they were looking at the historical conditions. At the same time, there were so many social and economic problems faced by the nation at that time. When we look at actually, in 1947, we got the freedom. So by getting the freedom from the Britishers, we have actually achieved a kind of a revolution, actually, that is a political revolution. So the way during the national movement itself, the nationalist leaders, actually national leaders very strongly actually determined to make India into a self-determinant, at the same time a egalitarian and democratic society. So under these circumstances, getting a freedom and the political transfer of the political power to the Indian leaders is actually a one step. That is we call it actually, it is a political revolution. So this political revolution is nothing but transfer of the power, but it is not going to make a very big change in terms of the restructuring the society and rebuilding the society the way they wanted to, actually. So in front of them, actually, there is a kind of another major task was there in front of the Constituent Assembly members. That task was actually the social revolution. Granville Austin actually says it, actually there is a requirement of the social revolution, and the Constituent Assembly members were actually grappling to this political revolution at one side. After achieving the political revolution, their task was actually to rebuild the society and reform the society into a most egalitarian and democratic manner. So that is that implies the social revolution, actually. So for this purpose, they have to lead actually the country in the future in a proper manner. For that purpose, they have met in that historical conditions, and taking it to all the historical juncture, actually, they wanted, the main intention of the Constituent Assembly members was transform the society into a most egalitarian manner and the most democratic manner, and reform the society and eradicate all the inequalities and all. This is the main aim of the Constituent Assembly members at that time.
जी सर, तो हमने जाना कि जिस समय हमारे देश का संविधान का दस्तावेज रचा जा रहा था, उस समय दो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रेवोल्यूशन थे. एक पॉलिटिकल रेवोल्यूशन और एक था सोशल रेवोल्यूशन. और इन दो मेजर चैलेंजेस, इन दो मेजर टास्क को ध्यान में रखते हुए संविधान का निर्माण किया जा रहा था. आगे बढ़ते हैं सर. सो व्हेन आवर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन वाज बीइंग फ्रेम्ड, certainly in the entire world we had certain samples of constitution already in place. So what were the different models that were in front of us, in front of our constitution makers, that could be replicated or borrowed for our context, for the Indian context, sir?
So this is also a very complicated task before the Constituent Assembly members at that time. So there were so many models at that time and so many ways to deal these conditions. So in this historical conditions, actually, they were looking at different alternative models which are available in front of them in the entire world. Because Indian Constitution is not merely a mechanical arrangement for the institutions, power, and the governance. It is the Constitution is a very a social document, the first and foremost social document as described by the Granville Austin, and it sets a vision, direction, and goal to the future as future policy makers. At the same time, they wanted to establish a kind of a wonderful society in future. So because of that, actually they were looking at the various alternative models which were actually available in front of them. So those models are nothing but basically in any constitution is nothing but a culmination of the historical conditions, at the same time social and economic aspirations of the people actually. So accordingly, at that time, the Indian Constituent Assembly members who are the makers of the Constitution, they were looking at different alternatives. Basically, we can look at, there were three alternatives in front of them. Those three alternatives are that, one is that a Soviet socialist model, and another one is that actually the European and American model, one of the other model was there. Apart from that, the traditional Indian indigenous model based on the Gandhian philosophy, there was another model was there. So these three are the basic, broadly we can divide the alternative models before the Constituent Assembly are the Soviet socialist model, then the European and American model. At the same time, we have our own Gandhian based, actually Gandhian principled based actually, that Indian indigenous model. So when they were looking at different things, because Indian indigenous model was the first and foremost option in front of them, because Gandhi led the national movement, and majority of the national movement, national leaders at the same time Constituent Assembly members are very much influenced by the national movement. So in these circumstances, in not only the national movement, Gandhian principles. In these circumstances, actually, they were looking at, Gandhi is always a champion of the village Swaraj, at the same time village self-republics. So he wanted to transform the Indian into a self-republics. Each village will be a self-republic and it will be having its own powers and functions. So all these powers and functions will be exercised by the village panchayat itself. And the village, each individual has taken as a unit actually. And each village is one of the prime basic political institution in the Gandhian principles, principle of this village self-republics. So under this what happens, each village will be regulating its own affairs without having any kind of restrictions. Almost all the powers are vested with the village panchayat. Then the provincial and the national panchayats are merely a kind of advisory things. The national panchayats will be dealing with the major and the key and functions like the civil aviation, defense, and currency, which cannot be dealt by the each village actually. So such model was actually one of the basic one. And Sriman Narayan Agarwal, as one of the prominent Gandhian in the Constituent Assembly, he has actually prepared a blueprint of the Gandhian model of the Constitution and submitted to the consideration of the Constituent Assembly. And Arun Chandra Guha has very strongly argued for the Gandhian model of principled Gandhian constitution actually based on the village self-republics. But ultimately when the debate and discussion was going on, there was a very little response to this Gandhian model of constitution. Why? Because there was a lot of criticism on this village republics also. How we can make these village republics, villages, those days in 1947, these villages as self-republics. There was a lot of doubt in the minds of the Constituent Assembly members. They could not even convince that these villages can be made as a self-republics, which will be regulating their own affairs. That was one of the things. At the same time, one more, the major opposition came from the Ambedkar Ambedkar did not believe that these villages can function as a self-republics and regulate their own affairs, because he describes this village as a den of ignorance, sick of localism, narrow-mindedness, casteism, communalism. These villages are actually grappling with all these kind of problems. How these villages can become the self-republics, that was one of the major doubt. So they did not actually believe this kind of things, but though they did not believe this kind of village self-republics, but they have given a consideration by opting this village self-republics and panchayat raj system actually in the directive principles of state policy under the Article 40 of the Indian Constitution. This kept aside this Gandhian model. Apart from that, actually they were looking at the other model, is that Soviet socialist model. This Soviet socialist model is based on a monolithic party system, and a Leviathan kind of state will be developed, and state will be controlling each and every sphere of the human life, and it can be a kind of a Leviathan kind of structure, and it can enter into the each and every sphere of the human life. So in these circumstances, actually the Constituent Assembly members at that time, they were very much influenced by the Russian Revolution and its advancement of the society and its development in socio-economic conditions of the society at that time in the Russia. So these are all actually were very much, there was a tremendous influence on this Constituent Assembly members. And majority of the leaders actually, like Nehru, even Patel, or majority of the members are very much influenced by the Russian socialist goals and the Russian socialist revolution. So under these circumstances also, they were looking at as a Russian socialist model as a model actually to the India, but this has also got a little favorable response from the Constituent Assembly members, because this monolithic constitution and with a Leviathan kind of structure, actually the state structure, which will be actually denying the fundamental rights and freedom. That was the fear of the Constituent Assembly members at that time. So it will be not taking care of the individual as a unit, and individual respect and other things, individual freedoms were not taking into consideration by such kind of structure. So because of that, they abandoned the idea of even having this Russian socialist model also. So by rejecting these two models, the Russian Soviet socialist model, stating that it is going to be a problem for this kind of a society, a diverse society, it will be not into taking into consideration of the human liberties and freedoms. That was the reason mainly to reject the Soviet socialist model. Then at the same time, the Gandhian model also, they have kept it aside. Apart from that, actually they have the basic other alternative model, is that the Westminster model, otherwise we can call it as broadly we can call it as a European American model. So this European American model, actually it was getting a favorable response, because the India, when you look at the historical development of the constitution, constitutional phases at the same time from the 1940s, before that also, actually we can see that 1935 Government of India Act, 1919 Government of India Act, 1909 Government of India Act, these are all actually established a kind of a parliamentary form of government in the nation already. At the same time, majority of the Constituent Assembly members were educated in the London, and they were very much influenced by the left, Western liberalism actually. This Western liberalism influence on the Constituent Assembly members is very tremendous. At the same time, we have already trained in that model by the Britishers during the British rule. So accordingly, we have already established some of the institutions, though there may be a limited manner, actually, there limited manner we have already trained and we have already established such institutions, maybe a parliamentary democracy, at the same time a broad federal structure. Apart from that, judiciary and other things, actually in the broad British model we have already established. So in that circumstances, actually adopting a Westminster model based on the British parliamentary model, actually it is a natural choice in front of the Constituent Assembly members. So they have adapted the parliamentary form of government and a parliamentary democracy to the future of India, and which will be taking into consideration that individual liberties, freedoms, at the same time welfare of the people, and everything will be taken care by this parliamentary democratic model. So under these circumstances, they have adapted this parliamentary democratic process, and West liberal democratic methods have very much influenced the people. So it is a kind of a natural choice. Though it is a natural choice, they did not take it as it is actually. They have made so many changes as per the Indian conditions. They have followed a midway, not neither it is a Western democratic, exactly the model, at the same time Soviet socialist model or the Gandhian model. All the things have they mixed it, and the amalgamation of all these ideals, best ideals as amalgamated, and the Indian constitution with the parliamentary democratic model actually has become a culmination point in that historical juncture. These are the things they were looking at, the alternatives.
Absolutely, sir. So, majorly we drew from the European American model or Westminster or parliamentary form of model, but definitely we had three or multiple choices in front of us. We primarily depended on some, but we borrowed the important and the useful elements from the others also, as sir described. That the Gandhian principles or the Gandhian decentralized model was also adopted in the DPSP, or the socialist principles of the Russian or the Soviet model were also adopted in the DPSP. So likewise, we borrowed from different principles, majorly focusing on the parliamentary Westminster sort of principle, because that, as sir explained, it was a natural choice because of the familiarity with the system. Now, moving on, sir, can we briefly discuss about the philosophical foundation around that time in the minds of the constitution makers while drafting our constitution? What was the philosophy, and where exactly can we see that philosophy in our constitution, sir?
Basically, as I was discussing in the very beginning itself, Indian constitution is not merely a mechanical arrangement for the power structure actually, the social institutions and all these things. So it's not only a arrangement for the power structures, political institutions and division of powers among the organs of the government and other institutions. These are all very much there in the Indian constitution, but at the same time it is a very, very foremost social document. At the same time, it has tried to set a vision, provide a goal to the future of the Indian nation actually. So when we look at these philosophical foundations, we have so many great ideals and ideas we can find it in the Indian constitution. Basically, to understand the Indian constitution actually, we have to look at the preamble. Preamble is the basic thing which we can understand through reading the preamble. By understanding the preamble and preamble or objectives, actually the objectives and ideals, we can truly understand the basic philosophy of the Indian constitution. For that actually, we have to very keenly look into the preamble of the Indian constitution and objectives resolution, at the same time the Constituent Assembly debates. So looking at the Constituent Assembly debates, especially the objective resolution, and based on that the preamble has been actually framed. So these three things will be making a key things to understand the basic philosophy of the Indian constitution. So the philosophy of the Indian constitution we will see in a different and varied clauses of the Indian constitution. We have a very broad and largest constitution in the world, and different clauses of the Indian constitution set vision and direction. So when we look at the preamble of the Indian constitution, actually we will see a wide variety of ideals, the basic ideals which the constitution actually stands. This preamble is nothing but a kind of a preface to the constitution, and which will be actually describing the entire ideas and ideals of the Indian constitution. So that's what actually it was. Justice Sikri has once in the Kesavananda Bharati has said that to understand the basic philosophy of the constitution, we have to depend upon the preamble of the Indian constitution and the glorious objectives actually enshrined in the preamble of the Indian constitution. That was the basic things. So when we look at the Indian constitution, the preamble of the Indian constitution, we see in the very first part itself the nature of the power. We the people, that power is actually derived from the people itself. People are supreme and sovereign in that way. At the same time, last parts of the preamble also says that this hereby adapt, enact and give to ourselves this constitution. So that also says, this is one of the important thing which we have to understand, that the power is derived from the people. People are supreme, and the people will be prevailing in this democratic process. Then we look at the other parts of the preamble. Actually, we will see that nature of the state. It is a Nature of the state is sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. The nature of the state is actually described in the Indian Constitution. It is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So it is a sovereign nation, at the same time a democratic principles wherever from top to the bottom. Actually, we have established democratic institutions at the ground level. We have the panchayat raj institutions from the village level, then the block level, taluk levels, taluk panchayats or mandal panchayats or block panchayats you can call it. Then the jilla panchayats will be there. Then state level, at the same time union level, we have everywhere we have a democratic institutions. So the democracy and democratic institutions and democratic process, one of the basic principles and foundations of the Indian Constitution. We can see that things. So that way, everywhere with democratic institutions and democratic process has been established in the Indian Constitution. So apart from that, we have a kind of, it is a republic. Why? Because though we have entered into a commonwealth actually, where the king or queen of the British actually heading this commonwealth group, but though we have established we are the member in the commonwealth group of commonwealth, but we have rejected the idea of giving the headship to the king or queen. We have been a republic. The republic means here we have to understand the head of the state has been elected by the people. So here the president of India is elected by the people. So it means a republic. The republic means the head of the state is elected by the people. Accordingly, we have our president of India will be elected by the people indirectly. So we became the republic. Despite of being the republic, we have, for some reasons, for practical reasons, for the help at the time, this as a nascent democracy, we require some kind of help from the British. So that's what we have entered into a parliament, even the Commonwealth also. Apart from that, we have the socialist principles. As we have kept it aside, the socialist and secular has been later we have added into the preamble. But these are, though it was not that initially in the preamble, the ideas and ideals were very much there in the form of the socialist principles in the directive principles of state policy and other parts of the Indian Constitution. So the nature of state has been described by the democratic, socialist, secular, and republic is one of the thing. And apart from that, we have the justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. So these are also different kinds of things. The principles, we look at the justice, the social, economic, and political. These are the threefold principles. The justice here, the economic justice, at the same time social justice, at the same time political justice. So this justice is one of the important, social justice is one of the important principle and important philosophy in the Indian Constitution. Like the fundamental rights in part 3 of the Indian Constitution deals with the many of the individual rights, like the justice in terms of the individual as a unit. We can see the other this economic and even the political justice also, we have given each individual a voting right. So accordingly, the political justice and individual liberties and everything is taken care by the fundamental rights under part 3 of the Indian Constitution. Then the justice, actually the social justice principles, we will see in the directive principles of the state policy under part 4 of the Indian Constitution. So part 4 of the Indian Constitution directly and clearly deals with the justice principles, social justice principles of the society. It varied classes, actually varied articles is meant to establish a egalitarian state, a democratic state, which means the equality will be really prevailing. For that purpose, Article 38, 39 and all other articles will be dealing for many things. So accordingly, we have so many social legislations like land ceiling, we have the things, reservations we have brought in. At the same time, monopoly restrictions we have brought in. Many social, very advanced social legislations we have started bringing up after a constitution came into force in 1950 itself. So constitution is aimed at establishing the justice, liberty, and equality. So equality means actually equality in many ways actually. The equality at the same freedom of thought, expression also we have taken into care in the form of fundamental rights by giving Article 19. It will be ensuring this liberty of thought, freedom and expression. Then right to life, Article 20 and 21 will be established. So this is the way actually different things, and fraternity also not it is limited to the fraternity of the Indian citizens. It will be the entire universal brotherhood actually here. That's what the Article 51 of the Indian Constitution deals with, that the actually with the universal brotherhood and at the same time settling the issues or disputes very peaceful manner. So these are the basic things I think we have running after time. So we can wind up with your conclusion.
Yes, sir. Yes, so definitely, sir. So, preamble primarily reflects the philosophy, the philosophical foundation of the Constitution. Now, overall in this session, we discussed what were the major challenges or tasks at hand for our Constitution makers when we were starting for the newly independent state, and that we tackled in terms of establishing a political revolution, and as Granville Austin says, the social revolution. Those were the major tasks at hand, and I think we have done a decent job after so many years, when in the context of post-colonial nations, primarily when we are seeing coup, we are seeing military takeovers or constitutions being written multiple times, our constitution stands sturdy, and that is primarily because we keep our document fluid and open to interpretation as per the time. So on that note, we would like to conclude this session, and I hope it is helpful to our learners. Thank you, sir, for guiding this session with us. Thank you.
Thank you.